the real hack in life is to embody that. Because if you bring it into your body, then you take it with you wherever you go. We are everywhere. It cannot be that we are only okay in one place. So rematriating the body is the first thing we must do.
Saludos and welcome to the Rematriating Boriken podcast, where we discuss the journey to the essence of these islands, this archipelago and her surrounding waters, the restoration of our essence before conquests and continued colonialism, the reclamation of our collective healing and liberation. I am Yasmin Hernandez, creator of Cuban artist, writer, activist, born and raised in Brooklyn, Rematriating Boriken.
Rematriate Your Body. June 4, 2018. I am born of many wombs, born from my mother's body on a foreign land, from an egg that grew while she was still in her mother's womb, created concurrently within the womb of our ancestral homeland. My own body cracked, exploded in pressure and pain into a pool of its own blood. To force my own babies from its womb, their moist bodies violently squeezed from me, entered the sphere like meteors combusting, like fire spewing from volcanoes, birthing this chain of islands our ancestors and we were to inhabit. They arrived screaming, aware of its own nakedness. My broken body knew to hold theirs, tiny, but whole to its own warm skin, like the cracked, deconstructed husk of a seed. This contact of life and light sent me sprouting green, like rebel resilient leaves, pushing past brown, barren branches of torn trees after hurricane winds had lifted. Green like this lush tropical land. My body was the island home within which my babies rolled, floating in salted life water, like the turquoise seas that bathe her. My broken body colonized was the space of incubation in which I myself had to craft and manifest their liberation. Through it, I could envision doing the same for myself. We steal rhetoric from recordings and books, struggle for similar things in the same ways others did, adopt struggles ours and not ours from spaces we inhabit or wish to inhabit, while neglecting the authentic home of our own bodies. We bear witness to colonial violence, protest its prevalence, ignore the hurt in our hearts, mirroring outside global violence instead, in our own and in others' beds, preying on pleasure, hoping the hurt will scab and scar. Instead, we carve wounds deeper into our skin and into the skin of lovers, whose bodies become battlegrounds to fight our own brokenness. The love of Homeland is born of our own bodies, moving metaphor of hills and valleys, of forests and caverns, of springs and wells whose environmental justice is intrinsically interwoven with our own health. We throw around words like revolutionary, like love, claiming to save some land or someone while we walk around broken and messed up. Let us all repatriate, board a boat or plane, land again, plant flags on our own selves, set roots down deep into the landscapes of our own bodies, each an island of infinite wisdom. Rematriate the place you've left, that you've hovered above and observed from afar like an accident victim on life support, determining whether it's time to leave or return to their body. Stop your non-committal vacation visits to the homeland when all you intend is to leave again, float outside yourself. Rematriate your own body land, the site, the source of all you need to know. Before you claim to help to save, to decolonize anything, rematriate, decolonize yourself first. Blue and green, the colors that I most celebrate in Cuban or at least with its first exhibition, the colors of the glowing dinoflagellates of our waters, of our bays. Green, the colors of our luciérnagas or fireflies, lightning bugs. And the green glow of our cucubanos, our bioluminescent click beetles. Blue and green, the colors mostly given off by luciferin, luciferase, protein, and enzyme that cause these creatures to bioluminesce. Those are the colors of the earth. Those are the colors of the earth. This month is Earth Day. I am not a person who usually subscribes to things like Earth Day, Latino Month, Women's Month y esa cosa, porque esa cosa la vivo todos los días. They're my daily reality. I am a woman 24/7, 365 days a year, just like I am an earthling and live here on this earth every day. And I live every day connected to this home of ours. And what I'm very clear about, especially since having come into this medicine of bioluminescence, I'm painting so much with those colors, glowing greens, glowing blues on black surfaces, is that when I drive anywhere along this corridor del oeste, that we got one main road over here, peoples. When I drive anywhere along this corridor, whether I'm dropping off my kids at school in Aguadilla, whether it is crossing from one side to the other side of Aguada, whether it's driving past Añasco into Mayagüez, where Cucubanación is. And on this drive, it is abundantly clear that all I see here are three things, primarily. Sky, blue sky, green leaves, green trees, green grasses, green palms. And for the areas that I'm able to see them, like in the elevations of Aguadilla or descending down into Añasco, leaving that montecito, ¿verdad? De Añasco, going down into flat Añasco, down into Mayagüez, that you see the ocean. You don't see the ocean, you see the Mona Passage from there. You see the blue of the water. And there is a peace that I constantly feel driving here, because I am enveloped in the colors of the earth. If I were an astronaut in outer space looking down upon this place, those are the colors that I would see. All of this is a reflection on home and the multiple notions of home. I talk about this island, this corner of this island, as a microcosm of the earth, as an abundant banquet of the colors of this earth. This archipelago as home, this earth as home. But the other home, these are all root chakra concepts. Homeland, earth, source. So going out into the cosmos, out to those ancestors, the expansion of the tribe from which we hail, and also very much the body, the feet, the root, the way we ground the body. And so rematriation of the body as principal concept to rematriation, honoring and loving the body like we honor and love the homeland. If we embrace our bodies as the true republic over which we have autonomy, over which we decide, we choose, then we have the capacity to feel at home wherever we happen to be, wherever our feet happen to stand. One of the things that I want to speak to is this sense of displacement, this collective grief, this collective trauma that we carry as people displaced for generations. What we see with the colonies, with places like Puerto Rico, where now there are more Puerto Ricans living outside of Puerto Rico than they are within it. We see like Guam, where you have more of the Chamorro community living outside of Guam than they do within. The psyche of the people is one that is tethered to this notion of displacement, this notion of being far from home, this notion of the motherless child that African Americans, that descendants of enslaved Africans have claimed for generations. The motherless child, a long way from home, as the Black spiritual sings. If we think of our bodies as these microcosms, much like Boriken is a microcosm of the earth, if we think of our bodies as a microcosm of the universe, especially considering that all the gases that the stars are comprised of are found in our own bodies, that we breathe these things, and oxygen and hydrogen and the same compounds that we find in our water, and that our bodies are predominantly water. Our bodies are the microcosm of the earth, microcosms of the universe. Then we can embrace our bodies as the original home. I speak to these things because there are many of us living this collective trauma, this collective grief, being in pain for being far away from this place, this archipelago, this homeland, or any other homeland for that matter. Several things inspiring this episode. Among them is having written a poem called Rematriate Your Body, was the original title I gave it before I came to the term rematriation and embraced that term. And that concept of home as body, body as home. When I knew that it was time for me to come to this archipelago permanently, I had no idea how that would happen. I had no idea how to make this move that we've been told is this impossible, monumental move. I did not know how to make that happen. Although I had done several things throughout my life that were thought to be impossible. So I never thought of the impossible as impossible. The impossible was impossible in the time being until we figured out how to make it possible. And I knew that that moment would come, but I didn't know how to bring that about. And so the decision that I made at the time, and what was possible at the moment, what I could control in my own hands, was to make the decision to live like I was already here. This is a big thing when it comes to manifestation, and this is something I'm needing to listen to for myself again and tap again into that power of manifestation. As they always say, you got to act like you're already there. And it always seems so bizarre and abstract to me, right? Like if there's a goal, something you're trying to achieve, act like you're already there. Like they talk about Stevie Nicks walking down the street in the Mission in San Fran, swinging her guitar, carrying her guitar case like she was a rock star long before she was. And it was just this empeño that this is what I know I am inside. Is y'all just need to catch up. And that has been very hard for me over the years, to just see myself already there. And here I am telling the story about that is exactly how I got myself to move to Puerto Rico, by living like I was already here. And so I lived in Queens, in Ozone Park, at the border of East New York, where I grew up. And how was I going to live there like I was already here? I took some notes from my brother. My brother loved fishing, loved going to the sea, to the ocean, to Cross Bay, where he would fish. And so I would go to a lot of, he had lived in Howard Beach, and we would go to a lot of the places that he would go to. And there was like this one particular sunset around 5 months rather, before the move, where that sunset, we went and watched that sunset. That sunset was in January, Holmes. It was brick cold on that beach. We were standing on that beach with a sea of people watching that sunset. The end of January. Don't sleep on New Yorkers. This is a myth that New Yorkers are hibernating in some apartment in the winter. Y'all know the Polar Bears Club. Like, they're New Yorkers connecting to nature. Ain't nothing stopping them, and not even the cold. And there are other people that come specifically, Inuit communities coming specifically from the cold for millennia. They don't stop living. And so we went out to see the sunset, and lo and behold, there was a whole number of people, a lot of West Indians, by the way, who are like, hey, here we are watching the sunset. And that sunset gave us permission to pursue the move actively. And that is what we did. And so we went to the shore more. We would go to the North Shore of Long Island. We would go to, before that in the fall, we would go to harvest festivals. And it was just about living in nature, being connected to nature, being by the sea, looking at the sun. Before I had left New York City, I already was familiar with where Mars would be in the sky, Venus, Jupiter. Those three planets were very prevalent in my life those last 2 years in New York. All of these things, the way the moon, the full moon would rise through our back door. We had a little teeny tiny porch in the back of that apartment, just off the kitchen. And that door, the moon, when it rose, it just aligned in a certain way, a certain time of the year, that it would literally rise through that back door. And by connecting to the moon, the sky, the sun, the stars, the sea, El Campo, didn't matter if it was El Campo de Long Island. It didn't matter if it was going to Coney Island. It didn't matter if it was taking my toddlers to Rockaway Beach to put their feet in the sand because the waves were so damn crazy. I was making the moves of acting like I was already here. And when we saw that sunset, what resounded was that that was the same sun setting off the west coast of Boriken. Sometimes separation, which is really a myth, just creates all sorts of dissonance in our minds. We're going to act like there's a different sun and a different sky here. And the thing is that there is a different feeling that we have when we are here. But the real trick, the real hack in life is to embody that. Because if you bring it into your body, then you take it with you wherever you go. And we know that Boricuas have been, are, and will be everywhere, en todas partes. Y hasta en la luna, como lo dijo Juan Antonio Corretjer. Y lo canta Roy Brown. We are everywhere. It cannot be that we are only okay in one place. And so the flip side of the story is when people do make it here and do move here and fall the F apart. Because they ain't ever learned how to ground in their own bodies, and they can't feel at home nowhere. Not here, not there, not anywhere. Now I sound like Dr. Seuss, but it's the truth. So rematriating the body is the first thing we must do. It's just as important as rematriating the mind, because we have to intellectually and consciously embrace the fact that we were taken from our home elsewhere, because so many of our ancestors If we look at our lineage, how many homes, how many pit stops are there in our lineage? And for those of us who come from the US, the Puerto Rican diaspora in the US, and anybody else listening that may not be of Puerto Rican descent, but is from the US, is a country built. It is a nation built on displacement. Everybody who has ever built any part of the US, when I say part, I'm not talking about the sacred lands of Turtle Island and its first peoples. I am talking about the structure, the construct, the imposition that is the concept of the US, built entirely on displacement. But what's interesting is that I think about that the territory, as in that land, that mass land that it is, in a similar way to Puerto Rico. When people talk about Puerto Rico es la isla del encanto, which is never a term that I use because it's been so co-opted and exploited, and because it's so overly romanticized, and because it's encouraged people to come here in a very extractive way, which is people coming here to take and not considering too much about what que van a aportar. What are they going to leave here? What are they going to exchange when they come? What will they contribute? What will they leave behind? It's about, I'm going there to have a great time and to heal and to dump all my trauma in her waters and her lands. And then I'm going to bounce and go back to the matrix. You know, the distortion de lo que es la isla del encanto, pero la isla del encanto is based on something very real. And it's based on the fact that people do feel magical when they're here, feel like they've stepped into this therapeutic place. I'm talking about those who don't live here. For those of us who do live here, we do feel that still, but we also have to live it together with the impositions of colonial realities. And we have to navigate those two things constantly. But what I'm thinking with the US is that for all the people who have flocked there, believing that it's this phenomenal place of opportunity, I would bet that a lot of that has less to do with this American dream that has locked so many out, and more to do con el encanto, the enchantment, the magic, the medicine that the people of Turtle Island have weaved and built in their sacred harmony with the land. See, that stuff can't be erased. It doesn't matter what conquests, invasions, occupations exist in a place. When we are talking about the medicine and power of nature, of spirit, and of people who have activated the divinity of spirit within to live in symbiosis and reciprocity and equilibrium with the earth and everything around them and everything on it, that can't be erased by a country in just like 200 years when that medicine has been there for millennia. It's very possible that what people think they flock to when they say we're going to the US and whatever, it's not this American dream that they have to bust their asses and sacrifice for, or end up getting arrested and kicked out for, or arrested and disappeared and detained in some center that nobody even knows where they are, sent back home in shackles and chains. That dream was a dream, and then you woke up, and then we all woke up, because it's astonishing to think the collective masses that subscribe to this. I am certain in my heart of hearts that the allure, that the magic of the US is the pulse of its indigenous people. It is the essence of that land, those lands, those peoples, for all their abundance, all their diversity, but had this one thing in common, that they lived deeply, deeply honoring those lands, those waters. Y esa magia perdura. Y perdura como perdura aquí en Puerto Rico, perdura aquí como en Vieques, como en Boriken. That is the spirit of divinity. That is the spirit of a people. That is the spirit of the land. That is the spirit of the water. That is the spirit of the plants and the trees. And when we recognize that and honor that, and we know that that is us, that we are a part of that. Y eso nunca, nunca se puede borrar. Eso nunca desaparece. And our bodies can suffer violence. Our bodies will suffer the violence of displacement. Our bodies will suffer the violence of physical violence at the hands of the state. Containment, being detained, being arrested, being beaten. The violence of imposed alcohol and chemical substances. The violence of overly processed foods that keep us sick. The violent prevalence of diabetes and hypertension and other illnesses throughout the Caribbean because of the high population of enslaved people here, and what the masters were giving them and the scraps that they were forced to eat. The inability of our bodies to process sugar and other things, so that generations after, we as descendants are still living these illnesses. The prevalence of illnesses on the rise today for the processed foods of the 20th century that are still being fed to us. The violence of being assaulted by electromagnetic fields and addicted to devices. Our bodies live all of that violence. Our bodies are flesh and bone, and our bodies have their vulnerabilities and weaknesses. But the consciousness and the consciousness of spirit knows that there is a living, breathing pulse permeating all things, all lands, all waters, and all of our bodies. This lives in our bodies, and we can take that magic everywhere. From the olive trees, bro, and here in Boriken, we talk about the Sebas living centuries and how much they've witnessed. Imagine the olive trees of Palestine alive for 3,000 years or more. Why do you think they chop down trees? They are our history, our ancestors, our essence. Chopping down these trees is just as good as eliminating bodies, flattening mosques and churches and temples and synagogues. All a massive nightmare when the reality has long been there. And the reality is what we feel in that healing vibration that calls us to be there. How many Puerto Ricans don't go to the Catskills, the 7 lakes, and feel connected there? How many Puerto Ricans are not spread across the Hudson Valley? How many people, how many Boricuas are not going up to Niagara and in wonder? This isn't the magnificence of the U.S. This is the spirit of the land, the spirit of earth, the spirit of divinity permeating all living things. We get this. We feel this and can root and connect to this, even if for whatever reason we can't be in Boriken or its archipelago. There are reasons for where we are. We are being put into position for very deliberate reasons. There is some work that we must complete wherever we are. And before you leave anywhere, make sure that that work is complete, or make sure you could get back to it, because you don't want to be anywhere and then feel unpresent. You can't anchor, you can't root, you can't ground, because you got some unfinished business across waters, across lands, across lifetimes. So in the same way that we defend the earth, the land, the waters, the environment, we go to mobilizations, to protest the injustices, to demand independence, to demand peace, to demand justice. These are the things we should be doing daily for our own bodies. The microcosm is that if you want to fight for autonomy and justice anywhere, you must be a walking, living example of that autonomy, of that wellness, of that peace, of that justice within your own organism. It starts out with getting adequate rest. Sleep is where our cells regenerate and heal. So when you think that you could be a machine going from one thing to the next, or one performance to the next, one job to the next, one gig to the next, and don't allow yourself adequate rest, you are welcoming in illness and pathology into your body. Sleep, rest, do that. Everything on the planet does it. The trees and the plants do it. And the whole earth does it when it rotates each night and gives us darkness so that our asses could go to sleep, rest and replenish. And there's the certainty that we're going to spin back towards the sun and there'll be light and we will rise with that sun and reactivate and spring into action. But when that sun starts to dip in our skies, our ancestors knew it was time to pause. Our bodies need it. Our spirits may not need it, but our bodies do. It is drinking water and hydrating so that we can maintain that 70+% of our bodies active. It is the basis of our blood. Our brains is that water. It is how we flush toxins from our body. Drink clean water. Eat clean foods. Mind what you put into your bodies and what you apply on your bodies. Mind how you prepare your food. Stop microwaving the nutrients out of shit. Stop storing your hot food in toxic plastics, allowing their toxins to seep into your food so that you can later consume. Stop those poisonous perfumes and the chemicals of your cremas and lotions and hair products. The toxic makeup that you put on your eyes or on your lips for you to ingest every time you lick them. So many things that we can do to honor and to rematriate our bodies and keep them safe. Even the fabrics we wear, the toxicity of plastics that are prevalent in everything from the damn polyester that came off disco dance club floors to our kids' school uniforms. Rematriating our bodies is about the wellness that we want to embody, because we get pissed off when they do this to Boriken, but we be colonizing our own bodies every day. We allow others like bosses to be our daily tyrants, but we claim we're going to free Puerto Rico. Don't even know how to live free day to day. It's a practice. It's not something you fight for, die for, or vote for. It is something you just practice every day. It is an action, a deliberate, conscious, daily action, practice, and praxis that you can start right now if you haven't already done so. You can live in rematriation, whether you are on Boriken, in Vieques, in Culebra, in Kissimmee, in Chicago, in Brooklyn, in San Fran, in Palestine, in Ghana, and in Charco or any number of charcos across this planet, or on La Luna, in La Luna. You can rematriate starting in your own bodies. In fact, se urge that you and we and all of us begin right there. Porque sin eso, nada. Some reflections from the Trinchera de Ideas we just had on this same theme, Rematriate Your Body. And some things that came up. The first thing, I need to acknowledge because there's always ancestors guiding the work, with their legacies, and certain things they're wanting us to know as we move along our paths, move forward in our paths. I was led to use this image by ancestra artist Cubana Ana Mendieta. It is a still of her work, Tree of Life, and it is an image that I use in my workshops at Cucubanación, especially when I do workshops around grounding. And in a recent workshop that I held at the space called Root to Heart, and that first session we did around grounding, I shared this image of her body covered in mud up against the trunk of this tree. And I share that image along with other images that I've taken of ceiba trees here on Boriken and in Bieque. At the end of the conversation, I was looking at an archipelago drawing that I had placed on the ground between myself and the folks who were there, and looking down at it and talking about it, I came to my mind these works of Ana Mendieta that I had seen at the Whitney Museum years ago, and it was works that she had created. She has done a series of silhouettes of women's bodies, her own body, which she would literally insert her body into the landscape and carve a silhouette around it. Sometimes the silhouette was just marked by water, marked by snow. Sometimes she would light the silhouette in the earth in flames. And this was her work about inserting her body in the land. I think of a quote by Melissa Rosario of Cepa, who was one of the people that I painted for the Rematriation series. And I will be sharing a very short video of hers. In fact, that video already appears, that clip already appears in episode 23, which is the episode of this podcast's 1-year anniversary. It's a compilation of Rematriation voices. And Melissa Rosario is on there speaking about, for her, in this point in her life, Rematriation is about reinserting herself in the land, right? Rematriation can mean different things for different people. In the case of Ana Mendieta, she and her sister were part of Operación Pedro Pan, or Peter Pan, Operation Peter Pan, which after the Cuban Revolution, families wishing to leave Cuba would send their children ahead and would basically send their children and entrust them to the care of convents. And in her case, she was under the care of nuns in Iowa, to move from Cuba as a child to Iowa, where you had no cultural reference whatsoever. And so Ana Mendieta, we're talking about someone from our sister islands, Cuba in this case, displaced, dispossessed, against her will, against her wishes. And when I say that, it is because when children are taken, even for myself, moving to Boriken when my children were 2 and 5, by virtue of the fact that they are children, parents make these decisions for our kids, and they don't offer consent. They don't understand what's about to happen, how their lives are about to change. And in this case, I think it was for the better of my children. But this idea that children have to migrate with their family without their conscious consent, without their conscious awareness of what is about to happen in their lives. And in the case of Ana Mendieta, taken far from her homeland, taken far from her family, her community, her artwork became all about reinserting her body in the land, in this endless quest, endless search for home. Y pues yo hablando de esta pieza, Tree of Life, where she has her nude body covered in mud, positioned up against this tree trunk. In the space, there were like these Ana Mendieta interceptions of wanting her work known and seen and talked about for this very thing, like channeling this experience, this legacy of her art with this conversation of rematriating the body. And one of the things that I said earlier in this podcast episode is we cannot see that land that is today under the jurisdiction of the US as something tainted that is part of this entity that is going through all sorts of ill transformations. That land and those waters are the sacred lands and waters of Turtle Island. And Ana Mendieta knew, coming from Cuba to Iowa, that that land was still sacred. That even though there may have been a trauma connected to this move, that there was a sanctity to the land on which she was standing. And other installations that she worked on happened to be in Mexico. I say, in this quest of getting herself back to Cuba, inserting her body in the land. So the image that came to me as we were wrapping up our conversation around rematriating the body was an image of a piece of hers. First, those clay pieces that I saw floating, these islands of fired earth, these silhouettes of women's bodies on fired clay on the ground, these islands. And so this, now I look up Isla Ana Mendieta and see another incredible piece of a silhouette formed from earth floating in water. And the way that this photograph, this black and white photograph, is taken is such that the clouds, the sky are reflected on that water. So as above, so below, the water is the sky is the water, and within it is this silhouette of a human body formed from earth. Ana Mendieta fell out of a window in Greenwich Village to her death. I think this was in the early 80s. She was, I believe, 36 years old when this happened. Many in the art world blame her husband, whose name I won't mention here because I'm centering Ana Mendieta. So if you want to learn more about this story, I've said it here before, I'll say it again, that on my platforms, I center who I need to center. I center the stories of the people who need to be lifted. I don't use my platforms to give any further fama or any attention to the people who have worked against our ability to live, to thrive in peace, in justice, and liberation. So centering Ana Mendieta and the way she searched her entire adult life for Homeland, for returning her body to her land. She was rematriating wherever she was, right there in Iowa or in Mexico, wherever her art happened to take her, recognizing that the land transcends this political jurisdiction of conquest. The land is always one. The land is always pure, as is the waters that connect us. We also watched the video of Boricua cantautora Lisbeth Roman's song Soy una isla. It's a gorgeous video of Lisbeth up on the top of a monte in El Yunque and just panned out view of El Yunque, the island, the sky, the greenery, los montes. It's a powerful message of the song where it says, He llegado creyendo estar perdida. I arrived believing myself lost, thinking we're lost and not even knowing that where we are is right where we need to be, thinking of all these messages that we as creatives, whether it's myself, thinking about the island body and this concept of Ana Mendieta, that Ana had worked on these floating island bodies, or Lisbeth Roman writing this gorgeous song. I will link that video below as well. I reference this tragic death of Ana Mendieta, I liken her essence as a spirit, as a fierce spirit, always needing to speak, to intercept, to be heard still, like the same way I see Julia de Burgos, the same way I see Frida Kahlo. Three mujeres who are still speaking from whatever dimension they are at this time, and still guiding us in the continued struggles we are living as people, as women, as artists, as people displaced. The question of rematriation, the question of living the collective trauma of displacement and dispossession has this life and death effect on us. Many people may think that I romanticize the concept of the return to Puerto Rico, of rematriation. Many people who may have these concepts of me only know me through social media. I left Brooklyn and Queens because I felt the call to come here to connect to the essence of this place, its authentic essence. To form a judgment on what I present based on what I present via social media. Social media is run by the very people working against us. Why would I present my essence, my authentic self fully through such a platform? The blessing of having a physical space to have these conversations in person is the blessing of going to the meat of the dialogue. It is the blessing of being free to rage, to cry, to release what needs to be released in those spaces. If you notice on my platforms, I post a bunch of flyers of what is coming and what is happening. I seldom post what was discussed there, the videos of people talking there, and photos of everyone who was there. This is how I craft, hold, and maintain a sanctuary space. I've been doing it this way since before recent political developments that everyone is now concerned about. We have known, people have long known that the sanctity of our stories are to be held sacred. I share a synopsis, I share un resumen aquí via my podcast to broaden the conversation so folks could participate, because I understand that we are spread across this archipelago, we are spread throughout an expansive diaspora. Those of us who come here who haven't fully grounded to our bodies, who are living still actively in the consciousness of that trauma of displacement, that trauma of colonialism, we have oftentimes this inability to ground or to root, not feel at home in our own bodies. We're not going to feel at home in the city. We're not going to feel at home when we get here. Many of us are coming here escaping something. Many of us are conditioned and taught to love externally more than we could love or ever care for our own selves. Part of that becomes the love of the homeland, and the homeland is something so much higher and sacred than our own selves that we have to self-sacrifice in order to develop a relationship with this place. My own heroes back in the day of nationalist heroes, Yo soy albisuita, how many of these people talked about you love la patria's valor y sacrificio. To love this place, you must sacrifice for it. And as I shared at this Trinchera, it was after Hurricane Maria when everyone was leaving and we were being persuaded, or at least people were trying to encourage us to leave, and people were doing all they could to get us out of Boriken, and we ended up staying. We never left. We never left ever. We never left after Maria. And I remember writing something where I said, I don't want to leave this place. And I don't want to die for this place. I want to live for this place. What does it mean to actively love from a place of vitality. Is that not what love and life are meant to be? I don't want anyone to die for me. Live for me, right? It's like Lauryn Hill sings in her song, The X Factor. You said you die for me. Give to me, give to me. Why don't you live for me? I hope I didn't misquote that. And what happens is that when we leave to escape our conditions elsewhere and arrive in the homeland with this ideal that the homeland will be the salvation and will save us. And then we arrive in the homeland, and in many cases, there are different things we face here, from unemployment to hurricanes to earthquakes to apagones to any number of things that are not these generally wide experience things. I call them the initiation. Everyone who has come here has had some sort of fuete, which is my other words, los fuete, los cantazo y los cocotazo. Everyone has had some sort of initiation here. And when folks flee to come to escape and find salvation and don't find it upon arriving, many of us fall the F apart. That is part of the initiation. It is the shock. It is the brutal wake-up call that the salvation we were seeking was not immediate like the amenities the colonizer promises to everybody. It was not supersized. It was not fast food through a drive-through. It was some shit you had to work for and earn. So there's a whole dissonance that may come through rematriation. There's nothing romantic about it. Hey, if you want the essence or the truth of my experience, it requires further engagement. It's not something I'm going to give you in a quick ass post on some platform owned by one of these monopolies, one of these moguls. And it's not something that I'm going to present fully here either on another platform. Life and death, at the end of the day, is the real measure, the essence of our work, how we lift, of how we bring vitality, of the tools and what we offer that allows us to step more deeply into the depths of our consciousness. As Getsia said at this Trinchera, that's the one quote I'll give you. I think Getsia was episode 11 on this podcast. And I will link it below. Getsia spoke to all the distractions we're living, that we don't get to experience the rawness of our consciousness, the depths of our own consciousness. And that's what rematriating the body is. When we speak to connecting to the essence, before we could do that with the homeland, we must know what our own essence is. When something is taken away from us, when there is some level of grief, of loss, when that thing that we a que nos entregamos, that we get lost in, is removed, whether it's a job, a relationship, or the loss of a loved one. It is usually in that solitude, in that grief, that we pause and are forced to go within and find ourselves in deeper parts of ourselves within that space. And that if we are not in that practice of entering our own body islands, island bodies, these floating bodies that are we as people, the question that I threw out at the end of the evening is, if our bodies are the islands, then what is the archipelago? Are these our families, our networks, our communities, our support systems? But if we are not used to going in and deep within our own island body, then we can never come anywhere, or to any homeland for that matter. Y encajar así no es tan fácil. So the rematriation lesson of Ana Mendieta was that she couldn't have power over what happened to her as a child. She didn't have power over the decisions her homeland was making. She didn't have power over having been sent to this convent in Iowa. She didn't have power over these things. She didn't have power over the path that her life took, but as an artist, she had the power and the dominion and the autonomy and the sovereignty over her own body. And she took her body and made an art and a creative practice and a life and rematriation praxis of reinserting her body over and over in the land. Be it on water, be it on sand, be it in soil, be it in snow, be it with fire. Marking her territory, claiming her territory, which was her own body. By inserting it in the land, she closed that wound, that open wound, that gap of being the motherless child a long way from home. Right there.
Whatever happened in that apartment right before Ana Mendieta's death, it is known that neighbors heard fighting, they heard screams, and perhaps it was exercising this sovereignty over her body, stepping into her power in this way that made Ana Mendieta a force that someone felt the need to rage against. And ironically, after her death, feminist artists had to protest major museums for the absence of Ana Mendieta's work.
Rematriating the body, exercising the only real, true autonomy and sovereignty that we have over our only real republic, that of our bodies, is how we practice this liberation that we hope to enjoy in the collective. One day, do we sit and wait, or do we practice with our own island bodies, these republics of ours that our spirit inhabits for this life? Thank you for listening. You can tune into future episodes every new and full moon when I post them. And for more information about the project Rematriating Boriken, you can visit rematriatingboriken.com. That's rematriating with an M, and Boriken with K-E-N. And Rematriating Boriken is also on Instagram and Facebook. So you can follow us there. If you like this, please give a like and a share. If you want updates for future posts, subscribe to this channel on YouTube. And thank you again so much for listening. In light always. This is Yasmin.